Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining Insight Legal for this latest webinar, where we're going to be discussing the challenges facing law firms attracting and also keeping talent. My name is Josh Dallywell, and unfortunately, I'm your only host on this call today. For those of you who are regulars on our webinar series will know I usually have a number of guests joining me, but it'll just be me talking for the better part of the next half an hour. I do, however, have my colleague Nathan monitoring the chat and QA boxes on Zoom for your questions. Nathan, good afternoon.
Hi, Josh. Hi, everyone.
It is worthwhile mentioning at this point that if you're not already familiar with Zoom, and I assume that we are all experts by now, that if you look at the icons on the toolbar, you'll see the ones that allow you to share your thoughts and questions with me today. If we do run out of time, I will reach out to the individuals whose questions I don't manage to cover on this live webinar. Questions submitted through Zoom can only be seen by me and Nathan, so please feel free to ask in confidence. Alternatively, you can reach us on webinars@insightlegal.co.uk and we'll pick up those during this session. This webinar is being recorded, so we will be making a copy available to everyone who's registered. And so normally you'll get a link to the video on YouTube as a private link. And normally, if it doesn't go out on the same day as the webinar, it normally follows on the day after. And I should also quickly mention that if you are watching this webinar as a recording, then again, please feel free to send your questions in either directly to myself or to the webinars team at webinars@insightlegal.co.uk. Now, just really kind of quickly for the benefit of all of those of you who are joining who aren't already familiar with Insight, and I did see a few new names on our webinar registration list. Insight Legal is a legal software company, and we typically work with practice managers, finance managers, and senior partners in law firms, really kind of anywhere up from sole practitioners to businesses of about 150 people. Although I think at the last count, our largest client now has just, I think, somewhere close to 230 users. Okay, so what are we covering off today? We're going to really kind of kick off this session by looking at some of the issues that law firms face in not only recruitment, but also retaining employees. And I'll go on to also talk about what employees in a post-COVID rising cost of living world are looking for from their employees. Okay, I want to obviously give you the opportunity not only to share your questions with us, but if you have anything you want to share with us on this webinar that you think needs a mention, then please feel free to share that on the chat and we'll try and bring your thoughts also to the audience today. Okay, so kicking off with why do law firms lose staff? Okay, now there's obviously been a lot of research done in this area over a number of years, and there's been a lot of it in the last couple of years, which has certainly, I guess, seen the biggest challenge and the biggest change in the working environment for most people, more so than probably in any time in the last couple of decades. And certainly for those starting off on their working lives, this is the new norm. So let's kind of start by looking at some of the problems. Now, the first issue I want to talk about here is onboarding. Recruitment is challenging at the best of times. And sometimes when we feel that we have the right employee, the right team member in place, that means that the hard work is done. And frankly, that's a mistake that's too often made. We assume that a new employee is going to automatically fit right in, and I think gone are the days when we could point a new employee at a desk and assume that they can just get on with it. I think that was certainly the case when I started my very first job. I was pointed at a desk which had a pen, a piece of paper, and a telephone on it. New recruits should really be set up for success from day one. A bad onboarding process means employees are not really properly integrated into the organization, nor embedded into their role. And often what that does is create a sense of disengagement that can lead to an unhappy employee. They need to understand what their value to the organization is, the technology and the processes available. If they were a cog in the system, what are all the other moving parts within that machine? And often there's a mismanagement of expectations which haven't necessarily been communicated during the recruitment process. And some of the common onboarding challenges are a lack of the clarity of the individual's role. What are the challenges that they will expect to face? What are their results? And so how are they going to be measured on targets and results? How do they manage their time? What happens if they have an issue with a customer, with their role, with their manager? And also kind of navigating through the culture of the organization and really kind of handling some of their personal transitions and relocations that go with being a part of a new role. Training. Now, a lack of training is probably one of the most commonly heard reasons for someone wanting to move firms. And often promises are made but not delivered on. It's no surprise that employees get fed up, and in some cases there is no training, and in other situations there is information overload, poor or outdated training material, or it's delivered badly. And it's not seen as an investment in the individual because at the end of the day, we're all busy, and sometimes no one wants to take responsibility for taking on more work at the law firm to teach the new person, because who's going to do my work? Okay, if that's the case. Creating a positive culture is obviously nowadays being seen an absolute must. Thoughts are that the right culture comes above salary in terms of requirements for a new employee who wants to come to work every day into a negative working environment. The culture of a firm comes top for a lot of people, and it is something that needs to be looked at. Culture is more than a marketing strapline. It has to be lived and it has to be delivered top down. At Insight Legal, we talk a lot about culture. We talk about taking responsibility. We talk about ownership of work. We have programs in place for people to extend their learning. We call out bad behavior, and also about taking ownership and openly talking about mistakes. Nathan, you probably haven't heard this yet, but I think the theme for next month is, I guess, owning your fuck-ups. Sorry, excuse my language, as opposed to burying them, and people being openly ask what they need help with rather than suffering in silence or feeling overwhelmed with workloads. And I suppose that brings me to the next point here, which is about kind of the I guess work-life balance. I think there is this idea that working long hours in law firms is inevitable. And I think there's this conception that in traditional working environments of measuring input and measuring input only, you may look around at the fee earners in your organization and you recognize the ones that come in early, or leave late, or send you emails in the evenings and on weekends because they're catching up on their work. Now, I want to bring an example here. I spoke to a law firm in the Northeast earlier this year, and the topic came up about time recording and measuring profitability. And the managing partner of the firm, I guess, kind of relayed to me the story of two fee earners at his firm, one who comes in at 9 every morning, takes an hour's lunch and leaves at 5 p.m. And the other one who comes in early, leaves late, works most evenings and weekends, and complains of workload and stress. Now, both fee earners bill the same amount each month, and there are several issues that this uncovers. One is, is the work that you undertake profitable? How do you measure profitability of the work you undertake? And is there a tendency to take on work that isn't? Are you charging a fair amount for all the work you do? And do you have the processes and technology in place to allow all of your employees to work efficiently? Okay. Now, ultimately, law firms not offering some degree of flexible work hours, will inevitably lose out in the war for legal talent. Every law firm is expected nowadays to give their employees the opportunity for advancement, whether that's up the career ladder or additional training, so that their day-to-day job becomes more varied and interesting. I've heard that no one wants to do the same job day in, day out for years on end. So they want to see, progression of their role. And I want to also kind of bring in management here, because firm employees and fee earners will have to feel value and meaning in the work they do, to feel appreciated and recognized, to have opportunities for growth and personal satisfaction, and to think that they make a contribution to something that's larger than themselves. I want to bring in a couple of quotes here that really kind of talk about the trust gap that currently sits in a lot of organizations. Carrie Cooper, who's the professor of organizational psychology and health at Lancaster University Management School, says that managers want people in the office because they want to see their little empires in front of them. It's totally about trust and the incompetence of managers who don't know how to manage people remotely. There needs to be a shift in focus to the end result, rather than the process of getting there, which can change from employee to employee. After all, delivery is what it's all about. And what does it matter if the work to get done is there or in the office or at home? And to back this up, Phil Flaxton there, who's the CEO of WorkWise, states that the fear for many managers is, if I can see how you do, I know you're working. Managers need training on how to assess a home worker on their output, but not necessarily their input. And really, from a practical perspective, businesses need to have the technology in place that allows employees to work to their full potential, whether that's in the office or at home. There are obviously numerous cloud-based video and I guess kind of working conferencing options out there. So there is really kind of no excuse for home working not to be 100% reflective of what is possible in the office. Employees need to feel safe in the knowledge that they can have the full trust of the directors at the firm. Everything can be accessed in the office. Everything that can be accessed in the office, it can be accessed from the home now as well. And you can see here in this situation, I'm working from home today. Nathan's in the office, and yet we work in the same team. I think now that we have employees working from home, we also have a trust issue. I guess this is again kind of we talk about this as being kind of the trust gap, and I see these things kind of come up on LinkedIn, especially from the US, where technology is now being installed on hybrid or remote working employees' laptops or their PCs, which allows employers to monitor screen activity and whether the keyboard or the cursor is being used. So much so now that, again, it's laughable that you can now buy something for $30 called a mouse jigger, which automatically moves your mouse every few seconds to show that you're active working at home. And I always kind of feel that if you feel the need to micromanage, why not start by employing people you trust, or trust in a process that allows you to measure outcomes as opposed to the input on any role. And I want to kind of bring in kind of a piece of research, which I guess has kind of been widely publicized this year. So, and again, I came across this on LinkedIn. Microsoft conducted a survey of 31,000 employees across, I think, some like 30 odd countries. It's part of something that Microsoft does every year to get a health check of the modern workplace and the workforce. And one of the comments I picked up from one of the Microsoft VPs during that article was that as organizations around the world make that kind of definitive shift from remote to hybrid work, one thing is clear: the people who went home to work in 2020 are not the same people returning to the office in 2022. So one of the things is the mindset of employees and people has dramatically changed. Workers want more fulfilling jobs that offer both meaning and purpose, as well as good pay. They also demand respect and appreciation for their efforts, and that's obviously not all entirely linked to salary. And so there's really kind of no erasing of the experience of the last couple of years, as we talked about, kind of being a post-COVID world, and employee expectations are higher than ever. People desire flexibility and face time, and they're kind of making career changes that prioritize not only their personal goals, but also their health and well-being. Okay, and so there's really kind of, I feel there's kind of no going back to the way it was before the COVID outbreak. Now, the survey also found that more than half of people are now more likely to prioritize their health and well-being over work. If employees don't feel empowered and are forced to go back into an office or full-time into the office, in some cases just to write letters, send emails, and take calls, why can't we do that at home? And I guess there is that question for firms. Managers need to assess this new change in attitude amongst their employees. You can't be too strict or too rigid when there is the availability of plentiful jobs for your employees to move into, which accommodate those. Okay. Now, an added challenge is providing a level playing field so that everyone feels that they're seen and also heard. I think the survey from Microsoft talked about almost half of remote workers, not feeling included within the organization. And also, to make matters worse, a significant number of leaders or managers, saying that they haven't developed, efficient hybrid meeting etiquette to ensure that everybody is included and engaged. Okay, so kind of the key thing here is that as practice managers and partners of firms, you need to adopt a degree of intention around giving everyone a voice at the table. The goal should be that the new cultural norms ensure that employees have the flexibility of, I guess, kind of how they do their work, but also where they do their work, that they're appreciated, but they also understand the value that they also bring to the organization. Okay, and ultimately what that leads to is them being motivated to innovate and be the best version of themselves. Now, their technology is there to help. You'd be amazed, or I'm still amazed at how many firms that we interact with on a daily basis, and I'm sure Nathan will agree on this as well, that firms who've never used Zoom or never used Teams, or don't have mics or cameras on their PCs and laptops, or still use a H drive to store their documents, and have no way of storing emails. And this is essentially the kind of the world in which your employees spend a huge amount of their time, not only in their working lives, but also in their personal lives, in terms of living in a technology-driven world. So there are software tools, platforms, video calling, video conferencing facilities out there that can bridge the difference between, I guess, or bridge both the physical and digital kind of divide. The key also is communication. Management needs to take the pulse of employees and actively listen to them, and based it on their feedback, make or put in place more intelligent processes, policies, and also programs that allow people to undertake their work more efficiently. And really kind of being armed with the appropriate data points, the wants and needs of employees, management can also then ensure that employees are engaged in their work, feel appreciated and energized, which should obviously help you cut down on attrition, help improve your recruiting efforts, and also keep existing staff from leaving. Obviously, again, that's a big challenge. Now, I want to bring in kind of Nathan at this point. I know obviously you've been keeping a tab on the questions there. Do we have anything from our listeners?
Yes, we've had a couple of things come through. So the first question for you is, what are some of the ways that firms measure employee output?
Okay, right. Well, I guess one of the things that that Insight Legal has is there's the whole suite of KPI reports that allow you to see open matters by fee earner and billable hours. But any of the reporting is only as good as the information that you collect. So many firms, for example, still claim not to time record because all they do is fixed fee work. But what you miss the point here is that an important part of time recording is to see whether the work you do reflects how much work has gone into it. So if you can either change your prices accordingly, look at how that you can potentially maximize efficiency, or refuse to undertake work that isn't making you any money, rather than having overworked employees who aren't profitable. Okay, that's a good question. And I think there is, again, for those of you who are existing Insight Legal clients who aren't necessarily using some of the KPI reporting functionality, I know it's one of the challenges that we have as your software provider is to keep you educated and informed of all the features of the software. And again, if anybody wants to see that, then please feel free to reach out to the team here for a demonstration of the reporting functionality. And again, like I said, the reporting is only as good as the information that you're capturing. And if you're not capturing all the right information, then obviously the reporting is going to be lacking in that area.
Perfect. And we just have one other question is, do you have any more information on the Microsoft survey?
I guess it's an easy one to Google. So I think Microsoft does an annual report on essentially kind of the health check of the employment, the employee and employer workplace. I think the most recent one was done in 2002. 2022, not 2002. I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called. If you make a note, Nathan, of the name of the person asking that question, I'll be more than happy to send them to a link to it. I just don't have it in front of me at the moment. But as I said, I think it is something around the Microsoft employer report or annual trends report. Cool. Any other questions?
No, that is everything.
Okay, brilliant. We are just slightly ahead of time. So maybe just a couple of other things I want to quickly cover off. We will, as I mentioned earlier, be sharing a copy of the video recording for this, so please keep an eye out for that link. That recording goes out to not only everybody who attends, but also everybody who registered and doesn't manage to make it on the day. For anyone watching this as a live session or a recording and you'd like a demo of Insight Legal, please feel free to contact me directly on the contact details you see there, or on the webinars team email address, again on the screen. Okay, our next webinar is going to be looking at our new client portal. We don't yet have a date for that, but we will be emailing more details on that in due course. I think that's everything from me. Thank you, Nathan, and for keeping an eye on the questions, and to everyone who's joined us for this webinar and for your participation and obviously for your questions. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.